What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming back with a box office breakdown video for this past weekend, which saw Black Panther: Wakanda Forever get to 500 or close to $550 million worldwide 2 weeks into its release. I warned people not to get confused and not to get bamboozled by the Friday to Friday drop-off, because what people often forget is that the Friday numbers of the first week include the Thursday premiere numbers, which means that number's always going to be a lot higher, which means you're always going to see a much higher percentage drop from Friday to Friday, whereas when you wait until the actual full weekend is out, you get a better idea of where this film is actually tracking. And right now, this film is tracking like a typical big-budget Hollywood film, especially when it comes to big budget superhero film that's getting pretty, again, fair word of mouth for it. Now, we may not want to say that about the movie because the film is not objectively very good, and the film is definitely coming in far below where the first movie came in, but the fact still remains, people are still going to see this movie, and this film right now is on pace to hit its break even very easily by next weekend and get even up to 800 to 850, possibly 900 million by the end of its box office run. So we'll go ahead and break down the numbers for this because this has been one interesting to watch. Last night, or rather yesterday morning, on the Salty Nerd podcast morning show, someone had asked about the Black Panther Wakanda Forever numbers because everyone, of course, was reporting about the massive Friday to Friday drop. I know that Jeremy even did a video himself. And kudos to Jeremy. He actually did, try to point out saying, I'm not saying the film is going to be a flop. I'm not saying the film is going to lose money. I am saying that the film is showing that there is this basically a law of diminishing returns for the MCU. And that is absolutely still true. But the fact still remains is that this film is on pace to make money, is going to be profitable, and is going to be quite a successful movie to boot, all the while still also being much less than what we've seen from other MCU films. Right now, this film is likely going to fall somewhere between the $750 million of Thor: Love and Thunder and the $950 million of Doctor Strange. It's not probably going to pass that $950 of Doctor Strange, just very little chance of that happening based off of the numbers that we are seeing, but let's just say right now that the chances of it getting to 8 to 850 is, I think, a lot more likely because this coming weekend, being, of course, Thanksgiving, is going to be a place where I think Black Panther is going to be able to make up some ground up against Doctor Strange's domestic numbers. And this is something I've been saying for months now. People are going to underestimate the domestic power of Black Panther because people underestimated the first time. The first Black Panther made $700 million. That's still one of the highest domestics of any MCU movie. This film right now is on pace to probably get around $500 million when everything is said and done. And even though that is indeed $200 million less than the first film, it is still a lot more than I think some people were originally projecting for this movie, especially based on the opening weekend numbers and just, again, basic projections as such. So as you see here from Deadline, they are, again, reporting how it's now closing into $550 million. Right now, sitting at 546.3. These numbers, of course, will be adjusted in the course of the next couple of days with actual numbers, but they tend not to be that far off from these overall projections. Looking at the numbers.com, as you can see, it's a 63% drop. Again, very different than what was being said, of course, with the Friday numbers, because the Friday numbers, as I said, had the Thursday opening night numbers added into it, and so therefore having an 80+% drop from week 1 to week 2, Friday to Friday, makes complete sense. It has obviously been able to make up ground on Saturday and is likely to make up ground today as well for a 63% drop, which, again, for a movie like this is actually quite healthy. It goes ahead and compares it over here in the Deadline article to other films. Overall, in fact, it even says it's a 49% drop in the offshore weekend, and that's actually better than the majority of other MCU titles for the same markets. So apparently, in those same markets internationally, Multiverse of Madness saw a 56% drop. Spider-Man No Way Home, we remember how much of a big film that movie was a 60% drop. So the fact that in these markets internationally, it's actually doing much better than these other films shows, hey, there are people who are going out to support this movie and are going to see it. The 63% drop is definitely not the best in the MCU, and it's definitely not the worst in the MCU. And again, it's basically a middling number, and that's the reason why this film right now is on pace to make what other films have made historically when at this point in the same point of their release, and that means the film getting somewhere, as I said, basically between $750 and $850 million if I had to make a guess. We also saw the new film The Menu come out. This was a independent film, or a smaller film from Fox Searchlight, or used to be Fox, now it's just Searchlight from Disney. Made $9 million, so a pretty decent opening there. The Chosen as well, also Had a Fathom event in over 2,000 screens, so that's a pretty good per theater number there. Black Adam continuing to drop off. This film is guaranteed to be a flop at this point. It added almost nothing to the overall total, not just domestically, but internationally too. So this film is set to be a flop. So yet again, Warner Brothers continuing to lose money at the box office, whereas Ticket to Paradise continues to do quite well for a movie that I still have no genuine interest in. Now, doing some comparisons, just to go again show you where my mindset is with Black Panther Wakanda Forever. As you can see, at the same point in its release, up against Doctor Strange from this year, Thor: Love and Thunder from this year, and up against the first Black Panther. So right now, at the same point in its release, 287.9 million domestic. Right now, at the same point of its release for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was at 292. Now, some might say, well, that means it's tracking behind it. Yes. But with the weekend coming up, right, with the holiday weekend coming up, and with big box office expected for Black Panther and no competition because there's no big films set to come out in competition up against it, and Black Adam's not really providing much competition at all, I think that this movie will definitely be able to catch up and if not pass up where Doctor Strange will have been at the same point in its release by next weekend. I think domestically, this film is going to be a lot stronger than what we saw from Doctor Strange. And again, I think a lot of it's going to come down to the fact that there are communities that are going to support this movie because of the fact that they feel represented on screen. Now, again, I don't think that that's a good way to watch movies per se, but it still is a reality nonetheless that we have to be able to admit to, because this 287 is much higher than the domestic numbers for Thor: Love and Thunder. As we had just mentioned, internationally, it's doing better than Thor: Love and Thunder, which, remember, ended at $750 million. That's the reason why I think $750 is a minimum for this movie at this point. And then it's definitely far behind the $406 million that the original Black Panther had at the time of its release. So there's no way it's going to get to the same numbers that the first film had. But to say that this film is not going to do well as far as like financials are concerned, we're looking at around a $100 million profit for this movie, which, no matter how you spin it, is still pretty good. Is it as good as the other films? No. But is it still good? Yes. So Black Panther, as I said, the worldwide total for it is $546.2 million. The menu is at 15.2. The Chosen, again, $8 million there. Black Adam is at $366.1 million at this point in time as well. So let's go ahead and get to the actual box office charting, as I know some people might be interested to see what the historical standards likely are going to be for this movie. So at 546.3, I'm projecting, based off of typical historical trends, the film will end somewhere between 780 million and $1 billion. Now, I want to just put the caveat out there that I don't think the film is going to double the amount of money it's made in the first 2 weeks. I just don't see that in the cards for this movie. I think that the overall word of mouth for it might be good among certain communities and among certain groups of people, especially MCU stans, but it's not going to be good enough in the normie audiences to be able to have that same type of magic that the first film had domestically. So because of that, I would say the film's closer or more likely to get that 780 million to, again, the average of between those two is $936.5 million. And so, as I said, I think that we are going to end up seeing this film get probably 800 million at least. Again, kind of adjusting what I said earlier, again, around 800 million is most likely a minimum number at this point in time. Remember, the film only needs to make around 625 million to break even, and so therefore I'm projecting the film to be either a $93.2 million gain or upwards of a $280 million gain, so probably going to be north of 100 million, maybe even close to 150 million in actual net gain profit. At this point, it's only around 47 million in the red, and I know that there are other channels out there that might say other metrics or might have other methodologies. This is the one that I have used for years now at this point in time, and this is one that I've always held a lot of trust in as far as, again, predicting these types of things. There are many other factors as far as other revenue streams, other costs, right, that sometimes people, try to add into the conversation saying, well, what about reshoots? And what about the projected massive marketing budget for the film being more than usual? Yes, but then you have to, if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, okay, well, what about any of the box office, budgets, or rather the positives that they might get from having certain types of product placements, right? Or having other types of marketing deals where they actually save money because both sides are getting something out of it. If you really want to go down that rabbit hole, there are, again, hundreds of different things that you could definitely go into, which is why I try to keep things very standardized and very simple for people to be able to hopefully understand. But again, Black Panther Wakanda Forever is doing really, really well. Again, is it doing as well as some of the other films? Not necessarily, but that does not mean that it's not doing well in and of itself. Just in comparison versus Black Adam's Black Adam 2 weeks into its release, it's more than double that. So it's easily going to beat, again, it already had beaten basically after its first weekend, the entire total of what Black Adam had actually done at this point in time. But let's go ahead and compare. Again, 546 is that number after for the first 2 weeks of release. So comparing it to Thor Love and Thunder, as you can see, it is doing much better. This film, Thor Love and Thunder, ended at $750 million and saw massive drops from each week. That means that we, again, at this ended at 750, 800 million being a bare minimum is just, again, very commonsensical, at least at this point in time. Looking at Jurassic World Dominion, this film made $1 billion by the end of its run, had very bad drops, had very bad word of mouth, and yet was able to still squeeze out $1 billion. I don't think that's going to be the same case for Black Panther, just because I think domestically it'll do better than what people expect. I don't think it'll be the same internationally. But again, that is, again, a number to compare it to. You also have Doctor Strange, right? People are going to compare it to that. Doctor Strange was well ahead of this movie internationally, right? So all around was well ahead of this movie. And again, that's a lot because it had a much bigger opening weekend. That all being said, this film saw massive drops and ended up ending around $950 million, which actually came in underneath where I had projected the film to come in. So again, not that much underneath it, but still underneath it nonetheless. And so that's why I think that for Black Panther, again, just comparing it to other films that had made similar amounts of money, right? The Batman was at $465.7 million, and that film ended around $770 million. As you can see, having those numbers, again, be closer to $800 million are definitely in the cards at this point in time. And so I just wanted to get that out there and wanted to make it very clear that I think this film is going to make quite a bit of money and still has quite a bit of room to grow at this point in time. For anyone interested in Black Adam, as I said, it really added nothing from last weekend. Right now, it's still sitting 80 million in the red, and I just do not see a path forward for this movie. I think right now it's getting gobbled up by the competition from Black Panther, and because of that, it's going to end up being a box office bomb, which is really not all that surprising, seeing again that the DCEU has struggled for a very, very long time now at this point to be able to make anything really at the box office, and it's had nonstop flops for really the past several movies. But anyway, what are y'all's thoughts about this? As I again had mentioned, don't always trust that Friday drop off, right? It definitely is indicating that there is an overall loss, right? Even if the film does get to what I expect it to be, which is, again, 800 to 850 million, maybe even more than that minimum, then you're looking at a film that is still going to be a box office success. But that's still also going to be much less than the $1.3 billion that the first film had made, and also is going to be less than what you saw for Doctor Strange. It is looking like this is going to be higher than Thor Love and Thunder, and that's showing us that there is definitely, I think, still audiences that are showing up for some movies and not for others, and also that these audiences can be somewhat malleable depending on whether the film or whether what kind of film it is that is getting released. Next year, I think, is going to be interesting because the Ant-Man films tend not to be massive moneymakers, and yet they end up costing quite a bit of money, so it'll be interesting to see if the next Ant-Man film actually can make its money back as it has the other times. And then after that, you have the Marvels, which I'm sure will be a massive, as far as budget is concerned, a massive budget, probably similar to what we see here, right, between $200 and $250 million. But I don't think that film is going to be as successful. I don't think it's going to have the same market that a film like Black Panther Wakanda Forever has at this point in time. So anyway, what are y'all's thoughts about this? Let me know in the comment section down below. And again, that's why you always want to try to go with historical trends on these things. And again, if you've been tracking the numbers for a long time, you're able to say, yes, that's right, this movie is acting very similar to this film, and that's why we can expect these numbers down the line. If you want a fuller box office breakdown, I plan to do one over on my channel in just a few minutes. Anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, light the fire button on Odyssey, smash the rumble button, and as always, God bless.